y'all. I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we're bringing you another episode of I'm Moving to North Carolina, Now What? So one of the best days of the entire contract is closing day, right? Because you're about to get your new home. So let's talk about how many different things can go wrong on closing day. So one of the biggest misnomers about buying a new home is that closing day is set in stone. It's a date that is immovable. Nothing could go wrong. You've already gotten through all the tough stuff. Unfortunately, there's actually a number of things that can kind of make you pivot on the day that's supposed to be a lot of fun and one of the best parts of the entire experience. Fortunately for us, you are working with trusted professionals. We can walk you through this and try to de-escalate it as much as possible. So one of the first things is on closing day, we always recommend you do a final walkthrough. So you're going back to the house to make sure it's in the same condition that it was in when you actually signed the contract. But what if the sellers forgot to keep the utilities on? So utilities, you're talking about electrical, kind of power to the house, water, gas, things like that. You want to make sure you flush every toilet, run every shower, every sink. You also flip every light switch. You check anything that's gas powered, whether it's the stove, the fireplace, HVAC system, etc. And you want to make sure all of that's still in working condition. And if there are no utilities, then you can't do that. It is really important as a seller, you don't turn those off too quickly because you could actually have to pay for the restart fee, which sometimes can be pretty substantial. So always make sure that transfer happens because the sellers are responsible through the end of closing day. So buyers, just be aware of that as a part of your final process. Another thing we're checking in that final walkthrough is, was all of the due diligence stuff done and was it done properly? So let's say that you renegotiated something during the due diligence period that was a task. There was a vendor involved, a fix that was needed. You want to double check that that was done properly. So not only was it done, but was it done properly? The way that we have this worded in the contract is in good workmanship-like quality. So let's say that there was a giant hole in the wall that the seller caused, and so you said that that had to be fixed by closing day. So what they did was they kind of just put some janky stuff over the top of it and then just plastered. They didn't even repaint. That would not be called workmanship quality. So we would want to have that fixed. Keep in mind, sometimes you get pushback and you have to make a decision on, do you want to delay closing in order to get these things done? Or is it sometimes better to throw money at the problem? So sometimes there's some renegotiation that can happen even on the final at the 11th hour. Another thing, and we get this a lot towards the end because they tend to take a little bit longer, is your survey. Sometimes a survey, which again is kind of like an outline, a map of the property where everything is in real time. Surveys can take weeks. So if you're delayed in ordering it, sometimes you don't get that until literally the day of closing. And you always want to have your closing attorney review all of that to make sure there's no encroachments. Encroachments, we have a whole nother video series on these, but essentially in a nutshell, it's when something is on a property line that shouldn't be there. So either you're on your neighbor's property or they're on yours, and it's typically some type of structure or something that was built and is now permanently there. Fences are probably the most common. So when you discover an encroachment, there's a whole line of fixes that you can do. You can leave it, you can determine there's an agreement needed, you can ask people to remove it, lots of different options. But that's another big one that happens at the 11th hour that we see that can delay closing. Another one is funds getting delayed. So sometimes the lender you've selected does not fund in time, meaning the money is not received. All the documents could have been signed, but the money is not there, so they can't record the deed. That has to happen once the funds clear. Another thing is you're also responsible for your own down payment and closing costs. Make sure your banking institution allows you to do that in a timely manner. Because again, the deed cannot record if we don't fully have funds. Another one is that the seller or the buyer gets sick. Sometimes things happen and people can't physically show up to the closing table. So it's really important you're taking care of your health all the way up until the end zone here. But also just be prepared that sometimes there's stuff that happens that's outside of your control and you do have the ability to push closing back should you need to. Another one is that the title work comes back and there's actually some blemishes to the title or in the chain of custody where the deed has transferred over the years. This one's a little bit more rare, but it does happen. Another one is that the underwriter, so this is the person who's working with your loan officer to close the loan, that they give a last minute stipulation. They might need additional documentation. So thinking about your work history, they might need some additional W-2s or tax paperwork and things like that to make sure that you're good for the loan. And then another one, which again is kind of rare, but it does happen, is if somebody is purchasing the property in an LLC, then sometimes they haven't registered for the new year with the Secretary of State. You need to be an active LLC if you are trying to purchase the property in that name. This one is super easy to fix. It's just a form you fill out online, easily taken care of, but it can cause a little hiccup right there at the end. So, closing day is exciting, but it is flexible. It is an intended goal. It is not a mandated goal. So just keep in mind that sometimes things can cause you to pivot. In the contract, there is a 7-day window where either the buyer or seller, if there is something that comes up that needs to be handled, they can adjust that timeline accordingly. After those 7 days, you are now officially in breach of contract, regardless of what has happened. So just keep that in mind and make sure you're protected. And as always, talk to your closing attorney to make sure you understand what the legal ramifications are. I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate. If you have any additional comments or questions, drop those down below and we'll see you on our next episode.